Welcome to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast. And you're very welcome back to the Hawkeye Sidekick Hurling podcast with your host Mark Kennedy, joined this week by Kieran Collins. Kieran, how are things?
Not too bad, Mark. Yourself?
Very good, very good. I suppose tonight we kind of know our Leinster and Munster Senior Hurling Championship finalists. We know who's finished third and getting into the All-Ireland qualifier series, and we know who's packing their bags for a long year of reflection. So we'll cover that, and we'll also cover the All-Ireland Under-20 game last weekend in Thurles. Pretty cagey affair, but very exciting encounter between Kilkenny and Limerick. I suppose, Kieran, let's start with Munster Senior Hurling Championship. We thought this time last week that it would be a frenzy of excitement. Two key marquee matchups, Clare versus Waterford and Tipperary versus Cork. But in the end, it kind of fizzled out pretty badly. What were your kind of thoughts on the two games, Kieran?
Yeah, I suppose looking at the Waterford-Clare game first, I think Waterford, from the start, were a beaten team. They didn't seem to have much fight in them. It was like they kind of, I think in their heads thought Cork are going to beat Tipperary and we don't have a chance. You know, they didn't put up, to me, they didn't look to put up any sort of a fight. You know, compared to Clare, like, could have taken the foot off the pedal, didn't, you know, really went at him. Clare played with the wind in the first half and they used it to their advantage, like going in 116 to 9 points at half time up. You know, the game was done at that stage. 13 points in it. I'd look from a Clare point of view. I think for Loan, it's important going into the Munster final to keep the run going that they're on, you know, and it's momentum going forward. And it's really put up, like there was players really put up their hand for selection. Some key players who probably didn't play well against Limerick that turned it around and had superb games. I think Peter Duggan, Shane O'Donnell being the two you're going to pick out. David Fitzgerald again, you know, another monster week. You know, I think he scored 2-3. You know, really, really good. David Reedy won 2. I said Duggan, he had 8 points, 5 of them from place balls, and Shane O'Donnell had 5 points. But yeah, Waterford really, really disappointing. Like, where has it gone? Like, in the space of 2 to 3 weeks, where the team is being talked as contenders for a Munster title and possibly an All-Ireland title, and for the train to go off the tracks in the space of 2 or 3 weeks, I'd say to the players and to the Waterford people, it must be still a state of shock. I think more so that this team were cruising in their eyes. I don't think Derek McGrath did them any favours, and you know, talking them up, and you know, it's a long way from a league final to an All-Ireland final to keep players on track and mind-wise and on the game. You know, I don't think that helped them, but you know, the fight wasn't there. Like, to be fair to Tipperary, you know, I think they put up a bit more of a fight, even though they had a slimmer chance of progressing. But I think Waterford, when they started that game, it was just in their eyes, I think you know, it was over. You know, it's very hard to see where Waterford will go from here. You know, I suppose there'll be a lot of media attention over will Liam Cahill and Mikey Beavan stay. You know, I'm sure he'll have to, you know, do a bit of soul searching himself over the next few weeks and months before a decision will be made. There's no doubt they have some exceptional players, but there seems to be a bit of a hoodoo with Waterford in round robins. You know, 3 years of round robin, 12 games, they've only won 1 and 1 draw. So they've lost 10 out of 12 games, which is, you know, it's an astonishing fact, record, really. Isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking 2018, 2019, and this year 2022. It's really interesting. You know, is it a case Waterford are going about this in the wrong way? Really hard to know. But I suppose again, when losing to Burka and Jamie Barron, you know, 2 colossal men, obviously in defence, and Barron going both ways, obviously didn't help their cause. But you know, any sign of a potential comeback, you know, Stephen Bennett gets a goal, 44th minute. Clare scored the next 7 out of 8 scores. You know, so any doubt that might have been in any person's head, or it was completely quelled by Clare. So you know, Clare really impressive and deserving, maybe not predicted, but deserving Munster finalists, you know, without a doubt.
Yeah, and you have flagged Clare, even at the start of this podcast back in February, that you really felt that this Clare team were going to go places with Brian Lowe and James Moore and the backroom staff and the players after they could get the likes of the Peter Duggans, the Shane O'Donnells back to really complement Tony Kelly. There's a solid unit there in Clare, and I mean, it showed minus Tony Kelly. Oh, you're Rory. Joined with Rory Walsh here. I was just saying there, Rory, good timing. Just in terms of Clare, just minus Tony Kelly, the unit really did impress massively in Cusack Park on last Sunday, and probably gives Brian Owen and the backroom team plenty to kind of think about going into that Munster final against Limerick.
Yeah, and it does show a bit of depth in the forward line as well. As we mentioned, Shane Meehan coming back to fitness, Shanahan coming back, David Reedy as well. So there are healthy options for Lohan there. And it does, I know there was a lot of people going around saying, Tony Kelly, one-man team or whatever. And look, he is vitally important to them because, he is the main man. And why would you be shooting from all angles if you have Kelly on the inside or whatever, So it is obviously part of the game plan is get the ball to Tony Kelly. But at the same time, it just shows that there are other serious forwards there if they are given space, they can do damage. Getting space off the Limerick backline though is, that is the challenge that will face them in the Munster final. And then look, just one thing I suppose from the last day out was if you looked at Clare's performances previously to the Limerick game, Peter Duggan, Cathal Malone, and Shane O'Donnell in particular had been to the fore, and I thought they were really quiet against Limerick and Ennis. And you'd be hoping that at least two of them, two out of the three of them, even if they improved, it just might give the team another kick on in the Munster final. Plus, I suppose those extra options he'll have, especially off the bench now, going into the Munster final. I think Clare are at 4-1. I think it's a crazy price. Limerick obviously favourites. They have the pedigree. There's still a question mark when it comes to the over Clare, can they answer the Munster final? We'll know a lot more then. But so far their form has been really good. Look, that's probably the main question going into it.
Absolutely. Did you get tickets today? And the terrace all sold out within 11 minutes. God, it's going to be an incredible atmosphere in Terrace on June Bank Holiday weekend.
Yeah, I wonder as well with the way the tickets went all out to the clubs. So what will happen is people would have bought as many as possible through the clubs, and then other people then would have come on today who they would have had a ticket for and bought terrace tickets. So I reckon tickets will filter through in the next few days. That some people will realise that they have more tickets than they need, and I think you're just hoping that scalpers didn't go on and Ticketmaster and take up load. That'd be the big worry when you see something like that in a big general sale when they know there's demand.
I think we'll soon find that out probably early next week when we'll see in social media about looking for various tickets and what have you not. But I suppose going back to these games here, Kieran, get back to yourself. Just in terms of Cork, and I mean, about 2-3 weeks ago we were, dare I say, writing off Cork's chances a little bit in terms of progressing out of Munster. But again, marquee win against Waterford down in Walsh Park, and backed it up fairly nicely against Tipperary. Now, the Noel McGrath penalty miss is a most pivotal part of that game. I mean, it's a 4-point lead for Tipperary at that point. Goal goes in, 7 points, but it's a 6-point turnaround with Connolly's goal. I suppose, Kieran, coming to you, Cork's performance, it was exhibition stuff at times, wasn't it?
Yeah, obviously Tips started strong, went up 1-3 to no score, I think at one stage. But, 10 minutes later, it was 2-5 to 1-4 to Cork. And from then on, not much changed. Obviously, McGrath's penalty, it was a 6-point swing. Had that gone in, you're talking 7 points. And really question marks will come on Cork then. But, they really turned it on. But I think maybe Tip made it easier for him at times as well. One thing I question is why, all over the years, you remember Ford was the penalty taker, and why he didn't hit that, and why McGrath was on the freeze when Ford would usually be the man. Just kind of something you might question. Yeah, look, Cork, really impressive, 1-4 from the bench, which you're going into the latter stages of the competition, you need scores from your bench. We all know the finishers are as important as the guys who are starting, Jack O'Connor, Shane Barr, Tim O'Mahony coming on. And I think as well, Ger Mellerick is back from injury and in a full back to replace Downey. You know, that'll be interesting the next day to see who will get named at full back. You know, I think a lot of people are kind of have question marks over Downey, but you know, interesting just what way they name their team the next day, or maybe the in the quarterfinal stage, like will they stick with Downey now? He's kind of played 2 good games there, or you know, where will Mellerick? Because Mellerick will feature in that team. I think he has to. I think for Tipperary point of view, you know, it's going to be a long summer and into next winter. They've lost to every Munster team 2022, which I'd say you're going back a long time for that stat to have been completed before. It's strange times for Tipperary, and anyone looking at Tipperary, you know, they're obviously consider themselves one of the traditional counties, and you know they don't associate themselves with losing anyway. So it's really, I suppose, I see a few knives out on Sunday, you know, questioning their fitness. You know, okay, it's a point to be made, but is fitness the true telling of the team not producing against, you know, with the players they've lost, there's no question marks. There was going to be a drop in form, but it's where the players are going to come out of. You know, if you look at last Sunday, take Noel McGrath, Jason Ford, and Jake Morris out, I think they were the only guys who really stood up to it, you know, putting scores on the board. Bar these 3 guys, there was only 4 other scorers with a point each, you know, so I think that tells the story really. Some guys who would have impressed against Limerick, you know, Stakelum and Ger Brown, you know, I think the last 2 days out they haven't been as impressive, and I think it'll be a long road back for Tipperary.
Yeah, Ruairi, get you in there. I suppose from a Cork perspective, it was a very pleasing performance, particularly when you saw the likes of Conor Lehane really kind of produce a devastating performance. 7 points from play, 1 from free. Shane Kingston with 4. Mark Coleman switched to wing back, gets these 3 points. Robbie O'Flynn 3 points. Seamus Hardenley 3 points. I can go on and on here. And Tim O'Mahony coming in off the bench 1-1. I suppose it was a very pleasing performance of Cork, really. And how do you rate Cork going into this kind of All-Ireland qualifier series now?
Yeah, as you said, Mark, they're a real, you know, spread of scores for Cork. And that's a big thing with a team. And look, I think Cork are one of these teams that are a real, you know, confidence team when things are going well, especially even during games. And then the question mark then is when things kind of go against them in games, you know, they seem to flip the other way. So, like, have Cork come out of that? Like, is there a bit more resilience about them? That time will tell there. But they have super hurlers, like they're very skillful. Conor Lehane, like the question marks we had over Conor in previous podcasts weren't his striking ability or whatever. The scores he puts up for Middleton season and season are incredible. So the talent is there with him. Could he put a bit of work rate in with it and a bit more tackling off the ball? And he has added that to his game this year. And I think that's probably like when we were questioning why Kingston was kind of going back to the same guys at the start of the year. But with Lehane, he probably saw that with him, that there was a bit more off the ball with him this year. And yeah, that's one thing that we can't fault him on. Like, he has brought that to his game so far. And again, look, the as you said, momentum is with them. They're flying. That was a huge moment in the game, the penalty, as you mentioned. Like, a 6-point swing there. And even for Tipperary point of view, if they had gone on again that extra 6-7 points up, you know, they would have been the ones with momentum. And that must have been some sucker punch, you know, for an inexperienced team like Tipperary to take. Saying that, I think Bonner here has been scapegoated because he is left with half the team that was there last year. And out of a pool of players with relative inexperience, he's to try and make a team out of them. Along with that, then John McGrath to get injured, you know, one of the main experienced guys he had this year, and tried to work without John McGrath in the forward line, missing Jason Ford then for another championship game. Seamus Collin gone. So, like, to be honest, I don't think anybody could have come into the Tipperary this year. And okay, would they have snuck a win? Maybe, but there's no way Tip were going to qualify, I think, this year with the players at his disposal. I'm saying that they're decent hurlers. The potential is there. They just like need a season or two under their belt. So patience is probably needed with them. And this is where I think Liam Sheedy has kind of got away with a lot here, because we mentioned this previously that Liam Sheedy won the All-Ireland in 2019, but over 2020, 2021, when he needed to start blooding players in, he didn't. They kept going back to the tried and trusted. And it kind of caught them Munster final last year, to be honest, that he didn't have faith in a subs bench. And on a hot day when his elder statesman retiring, like he, was very slow to replace them. And, he learned a lesson that day. But look, in the long term, it caused Tipperary huge problems, that you've now come to a point where Bonner has no choice but to put in 8, 9, either debutants or guys that had just had a few minutes off the bench in previous championships. So I think it's very unfair for Tipperary people to say, oh, Bonner, isn't up to it. Like he just doesn't have the players at the moment. Now, as we said, the talent is there with them. We've seen them win under 20, under 21 All Irelands. But just again, patience needed with them. And maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, we saw how quickly things turned negatively for Waterford. 12 months is a long time in hurling, and I'm sure with heads down and everything, they can, get back on track again.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Rory, in terms of Tipperary, because Bonner came in and he was quite clear in his mantra straight from the outset that this would be a transitional year, that he would be giving everyone a fair go. And to be perfectly fair, you think of Willie O'Connor's guys like that Kerry game, particularly in the Munster pre-season tournament. I mean, he was trying new guys out. He went to do divisional games at the back end of last year, really trying to identify a player pool, as you said, the legacy of Liam McCarthy, I think, to a certain extent. But I suppose it's going to need a bit of strength and conditioning. There has been a few sniping comments, apparently, in Tipperary from the likes of Paddy Stapleton. I think Bill Maher as well had kind of critiqued in terms of the athleticism of Cork versus Tipperary, that it was very much chalk and cheese. So I think from that perspective, Bonner knows what he has. And again, club championship will be starting pretty soon in Tipperary. And he needs to just really look at the minors and under 20s coming in. And hopefully the likes of the Brian O'Mara's, the Conleys that were unavailable this year, they'll come back in. Now, question marks here now rise over the likes of Patrick Bonner-Maher. Other marquee guys that have won All Ireland's made the part stage left here. So if that is the case, then a little bit more transition. But I think for Colin Bonner, next season is going to be critical, and particularly the league, because I hate to say it for him, but I think there has been a few sniping comments, and the vultures will start to circle very much in February and March if results in 1B don't go according to plan. But I suppose going back to Waterford here as well, guys, it's a very intriguing subplot in terms of Liam Cahill and Michael Bevins. They've delivered Waterford with an Alliance Hurling League title, and there seems to be speculation that these guys might walk away. If you're the Waterford County Board, should you be given a little bit of confidence, a little bit of commitment to Liam Cahill and Michael Bevins, given probably the off the season kind of talk with Tipperary, Kieran?
It's really hard to know, and I don't think there's probably a clear answer as to why this has happened. Like 3 weeks ago, this team were being talked contenders for the All Ireland, or as Derek McGrath said, the team to beat.
They certainly were. Everybody beat them.
Yeah, they can't all climb the steps, Derek. I made a point a few weeks ago after working on Waterford. The amount of flags and bunting that was up after the league final. Look, they're a county starved of success, but I think that's hype, and that feeds into players' minds. They're listening to the likes of Derek McGrath telling them they're going to do it this year and no one's going to touch them. It's very hard to keep players away from that for that long period of time. I've seen it in Limerick over the years. 2013 being the 1 year, exactly. we couldn't manage the 2 or 3 weeks between the All Ireland semi-final and the All Ireland final. Between the quarter final and the semi-final, the hype machine just went off the rails. Songs being written, all this, so what hype can do to a mindset of players, obviously, I'm sure it's proven that it usually affects them. But if you look back at, with a bit of hindsight, okay, Waterford were up and down, no different to any team in the league. You probably compare them to Galway, how they went about it. They won some, lost some, Kilkenny beat them. The form we were judging, and everyone was judging Waterford on, was based on the league semi-final and league final. But I think if you look at the two teams that were beaten, Wexford were atrocious that day. And haven't been good, okay, up to the Kilkenny game, they haven't been good, and Cork at the time were in a bad state. So is that form as good, looking back at it now, is that form as good as what people might have thought they were? I think the Limerick game, even into the early league. Sorry, back to the Tipperary game. Tipperary made them sweat for most of that game. And it was the closest Tipperary probably got to any real team. Okay, they pushed Limerick, but I think they really kind of scared Waterford that day. Then they came into Limerick, where 2 late goals, I think, really put a gloss over where they were. It was probably a 2-point hammering, really, at the end of the day, because I think, bar the goals, there was 8 or 9 points in that game, so that kind of glossed over. And then it came into the Cork game where, hype was building, and, maybe the form obviously wasn't as strong, and we got our true result of, what the Waterford team actually were. It's really hard to know. There's going to be lots of speculation and lots of different viewpoints on it. I really think, I think if you're looking at the round robin results over the 3 years they played in, like 1 win out of 12, that's something that needs to be looked at from a Waterford point of view. Is it a case they're doing too much in the league? I think it's been shown this year, like Clare and Limerick being the obvious ones. They beat Offaly and drew with each other, and now have gone an unbeaten run since. So maybe the league was managed wrong. It's really hard to know, and I think there's going to be, as long as a year it'll be in Tipperary, I think it'll be a longer summer and winter in Waterford.
I think so too. Yeah, disappointing end for Waterford. No, you can't sugarcoat it. I mean, Ballygunner, the All-Ireland Senior Club Championship, start of the year, that was the impetus. And I suppose the Waterford League form as well. Remember, they went up to Corrigan Park and nearly got turned over as well by Antrim. So, I mean, there was kind of various parts here. Dublin, they drew in Parnell Park, minus the Ballygunner guys. So maybe we, as you said yourself, Kieran, maybe took too much credence in the semi-final and final. Because there were good performances off Waterford, let's face it. But maybe that was kind of maybe overblown a little bit. But I think for Waterford, yeah, it's going to be a serious kind of examination and review. Liam Callum, Michael Bevins are honest. They're candid guys. They'll know what to do here. But I suppose loyalty-wise, next inter-county manager going into Waterford, potentially, they have to win a National Hurling League to keep their job. That's the barometer, unfortunately, here for anyone that's going to be interested in taking over if this managerial vacancy happens. But I suppose, guys, we can move quickly on to round 5 of Leinster. And Kieran, being based in Wexford, I know this time last week we were very much doom and gloom, and probably not giving Westmeath enough credit, I think, given their performance in round 4. But in fairness to Wexford, they absolutely produced a performance down in new PMC Nolan Park, and were fully deserving winners over Kilkenny.
Absolutely. Going back to last week, I suppose didn't give Wexford much of a chance, but really looking back over the last few years, they have had Kilkenny's number in games. They've had the beating of them. I think from 1 to 15, there was a really impressive performance. I think dotted all over the field, there was some exceptional performances. 12 different scores for Wexford. I think it tells its own story. I thought it looked really ominous early on. Kilkenny scored 1-4 in kind of a 5 or 6 minute period, and you were kind of thinking, right, it's not looking good, but Wexford really came back into it, and they outscored them 1-4 to 2 points. After that, Kilkenny only scored from play, actually, only 1 point for play from the 15th minute to the end of the first half. So I think, it showed Wexford's dominance, really, I suppose, the end of the second half. They went in 1-11 to 1-8 up, which really should have been 2-11 to 1-8, because I think Conor McDonald has to score.
That's an incredible save, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I think if you look at it, it was straight at him. I think either side of Owen Murphy, and it was a goal. Yeah, I think Kilkenny probably started second half strong again, but they never got ahead. I think they might have leveled it once or twice, but they never got ahead. And I think Wexford in the closing minutes, I think they were level, and Wexford outscored them 6 points to 2 in the closing minutes, and actually 6 different scores as well. I think if you look at the battle between Mikey Butler and Roy O'Connor, it's just unbelievable. I think Mikey Butler is really shaping up to be a top class cornerback. I don't know, Kilkenny, it's hard to know what kind of shape they're in going into the Leinster final. Mossy Keown obviously continued his goal scoring form. TJ Reid kind of comparable a bit now to Horgan. He's there for the frees. He's not seen to be doing a whole pile from play scoring wise, but I'm sure they're going to have their own vengeance on their last save from the last time they play Galway, and that'll probably be a bit of motivation from going into the Leinster final. But I think really, really impressed with Wexford. Interesting, actually. It must be a tactical kind of change. Like Tymon Donoghue was getting forward the last couple of games, scoring 1 or 2 points every game, which is something you wouldn't associate with him. Look, Lee Chin again, absolutely class. I think it just shows like Wexford don't play without Chin, and it's huge what he offers them going forward, defensively. And I think Damien Wreck again. I think already he's surely an all-star nominee. He's just been class. Obviously the block, which could have been a potential goal, on the flat of his belly and a pick up the ball and cool, easy liked and went out with it. Really impressive. I think I want to mention as well to Fergal Horgan. I think I mentioned him again last week. I think he just handles the game so well. I think he plays the advantage rule fairly. I think there was a couple of occasions where tempers come out afraid, but like he has control. He just has control from the start to finish, and he's just a really, really good referee. And it's a pity we just don't have more like him.
Absolutely, no. There seems to be a class apart, doesn't he? Ruairi, can we get you in here? What was the difference in a week with Wexford?
Oh, look, this was a thrilling performance from Wexford, and we haven't seen it since 2019 from them. And you were kind of looking at them, especially against Dublin, thinking, okay, Wexford aren't good enough to make the quarterfinals, and then they come out with a performance like this. What I loved about it again was, and Kieran alluded to it, when Kilkenny hit the 1-4, the response from Wexford was brilliant. Like, got themselves right back in it again going into half time. And the leaders really stood up for them. Lee Chin, Rory O'Connor got the better of that great duel in the second half and got some fantastic scores like when they needed it. And look, it was a sign, like, and here's the thing. I just feel like, I think I mentioned last week when I wrote off Wexford last week, I mentioned that the lose to the Munster final will probably have Dublin in the quarterfinal, and it was a bit of a safety net. But I think this is a dangerous game now. Whoever loses the Munster final, picking themselves up, because the Clare and Limerick Munster final is going to be full of emotion, and that whole local rivalry, in particular, losing that game, picking yourself up for a Wexford team now that are bouncing into the quarterfinal with their top players finally hitting form. I mentioned how Rory O'Connor had been a bit of a disappointment in the championship compared to the league form he had, and like he turned things around at the weekend. And look, with Chin playing well, Rory O'Connor playing well, Rec playing well, all the big guys for them coming to the fore, like they are a dangerous team. Are they going to go win in Ireland? Don't think so, but could they take out a team in the quarterfinal, a one-off match? Of course they could. And in a way, you'd love to see them play Galway again, if they had been the Leinster final, because they really were a shadow of what they could be the first time they played Galway. And Kilkenny, on the other hand, then, there's something about even the Kilkenny under-20 team who had the great victory over Limerick. They seem to be going for real physical hurlers at the moment, not the most skillful hurlers. Whereas before, we'd have always associated with Kilkenny skill and touch and movement, your DJ Carey's and PJ Delaney's and all these guys, even going back the years. And now they seem to be picking a lot of brute force and trying to mix that in with younger. It's kind of there's a story that when Eddie Brennan was over at Kilkenny 21s and Westmeath beat them, that he said to Cody, what went wrong? Like, you've seen them in training. And Cody said, you pick too many hurlers and not enough men. So that seems to be the mantra in Kilkenny at the moment. And you just wonder, is it the right route to go down? We'll see. I just thought their tactics when the game is in the melting pot, launching high ball down on top of the likes of O'Hanlon and Ryan in the Wexford backline. It was again and again they kind of did it. It was like Kilkenny had been trying to kind of mix it up and play a short game, but when the pressure came on, it was back to kind of default. And especially against a team like Wexford, who are really strong in the air down the centre, they got some scores off it, but overall you'd have to say it was a negative tactic compared to the way Wexford attacked. And Wexford, opened Kilkenny out, and it was it was chalk and cheese in terms of tactics. And to be honest, Wexford were the better hurling team in the day, no question. Wexford were the better hurling team. And and look, it's hard to say it was coming. The previous game drew at Westmeath, who everybody thought, themselves a leash, and it transpired they were fighting out at the bottom. But Westmeath were probably in a way the story of that group this year because of the level of their performance. But look. To come off that and then turn over Kilkenny the kingpins of Leinster hurling in Nolan Park, it was just a phenomenal achievement. And I think it really lifted the whole championship in a way, because everyone was talking about Munster and us based, kind of over this side and watching Limerick, Clare and these teams, we were kind of nearly, Leinster was a subplot, but Wexford kind of have put Leinster to the fore now. And the Galway-Kilkenny final, as you mentioned, the whole Cody Shefflin rematch and everything else, that's going to be, it's some weekend, like the Kilkenny and Galway games on Saturday evening, followed by Clare Limerick on the Sunday. So yeah, that's a bumper weekend of provincial final hurling. Like, can't wait for it.
Absolutely.
I think there'll be a bit of regret from Wexford though, because had they got over the line against Westmeath, they'd be staring into a Leinster final themselves. So I think they obviously will be happy with where they are, but I think there will be a little bit of regret deep in the mind that they let that one slip away, and for a potential Leinster final, because like Waterford, they're starved of success, and I saw was it 2015 when they won the Leinster final? Like, Jesus, there was, when Limerick won the All Ireland in 18, there wasn't as much celebration as there was for the Leinster final for Wexford. The numbers that were out was just incredible, and what a Leinster final would do to this team, even, it would be a huge boost. But just come back to your one point, Ruairi, about the puckouts. Like last week, I was kind of concerned for Wexford with Kilkenny's puckouts, but I think Kilkenny became very predictable with them. Like, everything went long. And I think Wexford dealt really well with it. I think it's something they probably knew they had to work on, because I don't think they were doing well early in the air this year. So I think really that's probably what was the winning of the match for Wexford was how they dealt with Kilkenny's puckouts. But in saying that, they were very, very predictable.
I totally agree there. Yeah, I thought Wexford Middleton really fronted up very well. I thought Keith was phenomenal. Just in everything he did. The 2 points, but so many, possessions, and his distribution was top notch. So I suppose a little bit of regret for Wexford, but at least they're still in the big dance, and that's something that Dublin can say if we can move swiftly on. Pearse Stadium in Salt Hill was there, and the locals in Galway were eagerly awaiting that, just to kind of see the performance of Galway. And to be fair to Galway, I thought it was a very efficient performance, I would say. Second half, got the job done over a Dublin side that tried hard, but again, forward line wise, scoring power wasn't there. And when you have the likes of Conor Whelan, Cathal Mannion, Joseph Cooney really hitting 10 points there from play, it really did tell the tale of the tape. And I think maybe raised a few questions here, Rory, on Matty Kenny, and whether he stays on as Dublin senior hurling manager after that loss and that elimination from the championship last weekend. I
don't think he does. You look at what have they, in a way, like what have they improved year on year? I don't think they have. Like even this year, we were just kind of saying that they were one of those teams, we mentioned this, that were actually trying in the league, and you could see that every week. They were really taught, like, and Matty Kenny's probably right, that if they were one of the teams that had they got to a league final, it would have been a big boost to them, and they couldn't achieve that. And we alluded to earlier, they played Waterford at home without the Ballygunner players in Parnell Park, and that was kind of a real disappointment, because they had gone down the previous week and beaten Tipperary and Thurles, and we kind of know now form-wise, people are probably, and we were reading a bit too much into it. So the signs are there, and then you're thinking championship. They had that great win down in Wexford, but again, it was a poor quality game of hurling. We alluded to that at the time. Wexford were not like they were at the weekend. Lee Chin, for example, who's he is their go-to guy, wasn't there. So it's hard to see them improving. Like, they have one-off really talented players, Owen O'Donnell, Donald Burke, who kind of carry the team, and they're completely reliant on those guys. Like, you look at we were a lot of people here in Limerick kind of joking, Clare and Tony Kelly and this and that, but you could see even without him there was a wider spread of scores. But I don't think Dublin, you take Donald Burke out there and they'd be in huge trouble. So look, I think they need a different approach. Maybe they probably even needed it before this year, to be honest. And Matty Kenny, based on what he achieved with Coola, was probably given another year to prove himself. And maybe there was signs there from Walsh Cup that they were going the right track. And then, then like Dave, it was a bit of a disaster this year. Like the Kilkenny game at home in Parnell Park, like that was, the way they kind of went down in that game, like faded really badly. And in a home championship game, that really shouldn't be happening like that. And then you just felt like going down to We had mentioned that Dublin had this good record against Galway of late and they wouldn't fear them. But you just kind of knew in your heart that the way Dublin had been playing and the way Galway were this year, that it would be a massive shock if they'd overturn them down in Salthill this year. And that's probably saying as much about the position Matty Kenny has them in or anything else. Like, let's not forget they've had really talented club teams there to choose from. And it's not just one-off team like the Coola who have won All Ireland, like Kilmacud. Like the Dublin County final this year was the best one I saw on TV. And Nafina and Kilmacud, and you're kind of going Ballyboden, another strong club team of late, and you just can't put a inter-county team together with the talent at their disposal. So you probably have to look at management.
Yeah, I agree with that, Rory. I think over the 5 games, Dublin scored 1 goal, which I think to progress to any, latter stages, games, you have to score goals, and that's it. Considering they've played Laois and Westmeath as well in that, so it's not like if it was in Munster where, you are playing, I suppose, the Westmeath and Laois game were looked at as weaker teams, and you'd imagine you'd be putting a score on them. Not to score a goal, I suppose, it's kind of criminal in a way. My fear for Dublin is you're kind of looking at the minors this year and the under 20s, it was hard to kind of pick any stars up and coming, and the fear for Dublin, will they go backwards regardless who comes in and takes over? Will they go back to being in the same classes as Westmeath, Laois and Antrim? I think now is the time that something will have to be done. Players that were disappointed, like last year watching the club hurling, and Ronan Hayes, really, really good for the club, and I thought he's going to be huge for Dublin next year. It just hasn't materialised. He's been so poor. And I think, as Rory said, you take Donald Burke out of that team, and you're questioning where the score is going to come from.
I'd agree. No, they had a few injuries. I suppose Matty Kenny could say that to Dublin County Board. Liam Rush, I thought, was a big loss, maybe down the spine of that team, but still, it's still the glaring issue of scores, I would say, and another long winter, I would say, for Dublin hurling. And I'd say there'll be plenty of suitors there looking for that Dublin job if it does open up. James O'Connor was touting Anthony Daly for a bit of a reunion, but I think there'll be Eddie Brennan. I think it would be a marvellous appointment there potentially. But I suppose going to Galway here, guys, Rory and Kieran, they've shown progression. There's been kind of dips in, that Wexford opening day was kind of a very hit and miss performance. But in fairness to Galway, unbeaten, and I suppose going to this Leinster final probably as hot favourites against Kilkenny, which is dangerous talk really, coming from me. But I suppose, Kieran, where are the strengths here in this Galway side?
I think if you're Shefflin, you're pretty happy with how things have gone for them. They're kind of coasting along. That Dublin game, there was no over exuberance. They did enough to see out the game and get to win. Some really good performances again, and I think they've built a good panel. And I think looking at their full forward line, I think Brian Kincannon, Conor Whelan, and Colin Mannion, they're turning into a deadly full forward line. The scores they're getting, and then you look at the guys behind them, Tom Monaghan, Joseph Cooney, Conor Cooney, so they're serious forwards. Yeah, I think they're in a very, very good place. I think they will fancy themselves going into a Kilkenny game. They probably would have learned a lot from the first one. They're going in, momentum behind them. I think Kilkenny will be doing a bit of soul searching after that Wexford game, losing at home in that manner. And, obviously confidence and momentum it's a great boost to any team, especially going to a final. So, people who were talking about contenders for the All-Ireland, Galway's name wasn't on too many people's lips. It was, Limerick, Waterford, Cork going into the championship, but I think Galway are right up there.
It's been a very tight camp up here. I'm based in Galway. And, typically in years gone by, you may have heard leaked team news or who would be playing. There's been none of that. It's been very tight, close-knit camp. The camaraderie between the squad seems to be as high as ever. I think, to be fair to Galway, I think they may have a statement of intent here against Kilkenny and Leinster hurling final. It's a massive prize getting into an All-Ireland semi-final and 17 minutes away from an All-Ireland. And that's all to look forward to on the 4th of June. I suppose we get to the final game, and this was the kind of the six-pointer, as they would say. Laois and Westmeath in MW Hire O'More Park in Portlaoise. And I suppose, guys, collectively, we're happy for Westmeath, Joe Fortune, the management team and the players. They backed up the performance of Wexford with a very convincing win over injury hit Laois. I suppose, Rory, thoughts on Westmeath this season? Been probably a year of progression, would you agree?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, they've kind of been, in one way, the story of the Leinster Championship. And Joe Fortune, you have to say he's been a breath of fresh air to it, because even his interview last day, he said every game we went at in Leinster, we treated every game the same, regardless of who we were playing. We went out to do our best in every game. And you just get a sense that Laois are kind of they have a thing of might pick and choose their games that and it's kind of come back and bit them this way. We saw it being successful for Laois in the past, where they've ambushed Antrim in particular, when Antrim looked like they were going much better against other teams, and then Laois would pull out a big performance against them. But I preferred the Westmeath approach, where even the first game against Kilkenny, up until they got a man sent off, maybe 45 minutes into the game, they were still with Kilkenny, and that was kind of a sign that they had really progressed, and it didn't become a one-off game. The only game that they were really in trouble in was the Galway game in Salthill, where they got off to a terrible start, and just, that was the one game where they didn't really compete. And the other games, like, they were more than competitive. Like, as we said, draw at Wexford, massive achievement for Westmeath. And look, it has been coming underage. They have been promising underage. You just hope that, like, Westmeath now kind of put the resources in and really, because they're very close to making the next kind of breakthrough in it. Just a small bit of a worry underage at the moment. Currently underage, like, they're not very competitive with going for a Leinster minor championship, or you couldn't see them like Offaly this year in Laois getting to a final. I think Westmeath might be a bit behind that. So you're just hoping that they can pick things up really strongly underage and kind of add to this present team they have, because look, all they might need is another 2 or 3 hurlers, especially strengthen the subs bench, and they could easily be following up that result against Wexford more next year championship. But overall, like, it was just a great way of taking on the big counties, was to just say, here, let's throw everything at everyone. And they benefited from in the long run, because they were streets ahead of Laois in that match.
Absolutely. And I suppose, Kieran, bring you in here. Laois are looking for a result in the favour from Kerry in the Joe McDonagh Cup final. Maybe we can get to that. But I suppose from a Laois performance this season, it's been a bit of a struggle for them. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think at stages, like, I suppose in a bit of fairness, they've been hit with a lot of injuries at times. But I think, you have to commend Westmeath's approach. As Ruairi highlighted there, bar one game, they were in it until maybe 45, 50 minutes. And I think this game, like, at 45 minutes, there was only 2 points in it, so the tails turned a bit, and Westmeath actually finished stronger, winning by 18 points in the end, 4 late goals. And I think they're going to benefit, like, they're going to be playing Leinster Championship again next year, along with Division 1, so I think, for progression, that's where they want to be, and that's the teams you want to be playing against Division 1 teams, and that will bring them along. Look, I'd say unless Kerry win, Laois should play Joe McDonagh again next year. I think if you look back to Eddie Brennan's time with Laois, and all the noise that kind of came out, and the way he had to leave the job with the podcast with Wooly and all that, like, I think that's a true sign of what's going on in the background in Laois. I don't think the commitment doesn't seem to be there from the county board, and I think it's kind of showing. They went back to the tried and trusted. It didn't work before, but back to cheddar, and I don't think they probably, not too many people will be queuing up for the job if it came up again. They have some good players, and they have a good minor team this year, and I think if the right work was done, I wouldn't be writing them off down to the Joe McDonagh to stay forever. They're good enough, and they've good enough hurlers to, if they do go down, to come back up again. But I think Westmeath, really commendable. I think last week kind of pointed out, you'd be kind of concerned about where the scores were going to come from, but they were kind of heavily reliant on Killian Doyle out of the championship. But Owen Keys 2-1, Niall O'Brien 1-3, Niall Mitchell 2 goals, Joey Boyle 5 points. I think so. I think everyone stood up really, and I think it's I just delighted from just purely because of the approach they gave, and I think looking back for them, it'll be a really, really positive season.
I think it may give inspiration to Antrim or Kerry, for that mind, going into Joe McDonagh, that fresh mindset, that approach to really go all out and really express yourself. And I would sincerely hope that Tommy Doyle gets an All-Star nominee. He's been absolutely nothing short of sensational again, defensively for Westmeath, and Killian Doyle as well. has kind of raked in a huge number of points here as well. And, Ex's championship with great credit. David Glennon. I think there's great foundations there, and hopefully Westmeath will kick on. I suppose we can quickly get to the Joe McDonagh Cup, guys, because last weekend we thought maybe it'd be kind of a fairly mundane kind of fixture list, but my God, was it far from it. I mean, Kerry went up to Antrim getting a result, and Carlow upsetting Offaly, which I think for Offaly hurling development after the euphoria of the minor Hurling Leinster Championship win, this really knocks them back to earth fairly quickly, Kieran.
Absolutely, yeah. A huge result for Kerry. Like we all know how hard it is to go to Belfast to get a result. We've seen the Division 1 teams failing up there. So I think really kudos to them. I suppose they're just reward getting into the final. And I think you probably have to fancy Antrim, probably based on what we've seen of them this year, especially in the league. But look, a one-off game. Who knows what will happen? Yeah.
Ruairi, can I get you in here? Let's say, argument's sake, Kerry do triumph in the Joe McDonagh Cup final, and no one will begrudge them of that. They've been knocking on the door for many years now. They then would have to play Tipperary in a relegation playoff final again, a double whammy promotion playoff. What are your thoughts on that? We're trying to develop hurling as an inter-county spectacle here to get more counties involved. What's your viewpoint here in terms of the Kerry situation potentially? They may find themselves in.
We'd all be Kerry fans that day.
Yes, I think we could fill Thurles with Kerry fans for that game should it happen. But no, to be honest, I actually think that like the GAA, if it transpires, that match should never take place. Kerry should go up, and there should be 6 teams in Munster next year. Give Kerry their go. If it transpires that Kerry are, way off the other teams in Munster, which could happen, which could easily happen, then then at least they'll know. But it's just unfair that Antrim beat them by a point, let's say, and Antrim goes straight up to Leinster. Kerry win by a point. Kerry didn't have to play Tipperary. It's just so give them their year, and if it turns out they will get, if it turns out they are by far the weakest team next year, they'll be relegated then and back down. But I think they deserve their shot at a Munster Championship should they win the Joe McDonagh Cup. That should be just given. And the fact that Leinster are going with a 6-team tournament, it's very easy to pair up Munster in the exact same situation. And you know what? Even give Kerry every game at home for their first year in it as well. Give them every advantage they can in it. Not that their county board needs the extra money anyway down in Kerry. But look, in terms of making it more competitive, I don't think any of the other teams in Munster would quarrel about going down to Killarney or Austin Stack Park to play Munster Championship games. That's my first one. Second thing is Offaly, as you mentioned, a huge surprise. And the fact that like a couple of years ago, if Carlow had turned them over, it would be, in fact, Carlow may have even been favourites. But with the form Carlow had been showing through the league and in the Joe McDonagh to take out Offaly in that last game, massive victory for Carlow in a way, but a huge setback for Offaly hurling, who were slowly making the progress up from Christy Ring to Joe McDonagh, and then all presumed they'd be taking on Antrim for a spot in the Leinster Championship. But talk about cat amongst the pigeons, and as you said, Mark, a dampener on their recent minor success. So it just shows that like the Joe McDonagh, we've mentioned this before, it doesn't get any of the coverage. Like I'd say, give it to TG Carter next year. Let them show, because you're looking like we're judging off 1 minute highlights and TG Carter on a Monday night where they're trying to cram everything in, and you're seeing like phenomenal scores and like the scoreline between Offaly and Kerry this year, where I can't remember exactly, it was something like 4:25 to 2:30. It was just incredible, and you're saying, God, I'd love to have seen that game midday on a Saturday when there was no hurling match on, is when they're on. So I don't know why they can't show these games, because there's definitely enough hurling following in the country who appreciate that this is a very good standard of hurling. And being involved in colleges hurling, like there are serious hurlers from these counties. Like you're looking at Shane Conway, who led UCC to Fitzgibbon Cup there 2 years ago. It was their best forward in view, and these guys are all on display, except the coverage is shocking. So that's something that really needs to change from next year and give the competition the credit it deserves.
I think as well, if it gets the airtime, that will also bring on, within counties, like, if you're 7, 8, 9-year-old from Laois or Antrim or Carlow, and you're seeing, your jersey on the television, that's an incentive to get young lads in the game. I say it's very hard to get people involved if they're not seeing any success, or or if it's not there playing to be seen on television every Saturday or Sunday, compared to the top teams, which were on, so with due reward, T to G, obviously we've been applauding them for many weeks, but I think that would be a great step, if that was to be taken.
I completely agree with you guys. That'll be an intriguing Joe McDonagh final. I mean, Antrim may have kind of rested a few marquee guys, but I think they know the task ahead. A very determined Kerry side, no short of motivation to head to Croke Park and right a few wrongs from previous years. So I think that'll be a very intriguing match. I suppose we can conclude, guys, with the 2022 All-Ireland's Under-20 hurling final that took place last weekend in FBD Semple Stadium, Thurles. I thought it was a real classic final of a competition. Nothing given out easy here. And I'd had that inkling about Kilkenny last week, guys, just in terms of their physicality, how they may test Limerick out a little bit in their tactical nous and game management. They come away with a 19 points to 18 point win. And I know there was controversy over a particular point, but I felt Kilkenny maybe were a little bit more composed down the stretch, Kieran. Yeah. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yeah. I suppose if you look at the first half, I think the first half in particular was really, really cagey, and it was just a typical final, I think players were probably afraid to make mistakes, and the middle third was congested, and I think Kilkenny, to be fair, they had the tactics bang on. They really closed them down. Kilkenny playing with the breeze in the first half, only going in a point up. I don't think there was any more than one score between the sides in the first half. It was kind of just tit for tat all the way along. I don't think Limerick could never get in front then in the second half. And I think, in fairness to Kilkenny, they created more kind of half goal chances than Limerick did. They got in closer. I think Clark maybe denied, I think it was Ian Byrne maybe twice there in quick enough succession. Look, obviously the point was a talking, it had to be talked about. You'd wonder, was Hawkeye turned on? There's a lot of speculation it wasn't. I'm not too sure. My only real grievance from the whole, not the game, but the whole thing was, what difference Cathal O'Neill would have made to that Limerick team, from a stupid rule that shouldn't be there. And in a way, you're kind of looking back, have GA robbed that team a genuine, real chance of an All-Ireland medal, because, had he been there, I think he would offer a bit more. And, you'd have to kind of put him down for 3 or 4 points each game he plays. And I think that, that rule I think there's no county will have any qualms about it. Just they have to get rid of it.
Yeah. Ruairi, get you in here. Just in terms of that Kilkenny performance, I thought it was a very workmanlike performance, full of work rate, endeavour. I thought Derek Ling particularly got his tactics spot on, creating a bit of space inside for the likes of Billy Drennan to really, show his prowess. I know we've kind of been maybe a little bit critical of him in terms of his overall open play, but my God, 9 points, 5 from play. I mean, a very powerful figure and prominent down the stretch for Kilkenny and led by example. Yeah,
he definitely showed his worth in the final. Very strong in the air as well, and as a typical Kilkenny forward, can win his own ball, which was, in a tight game like that where there's a lot of 50-50 ball going in, the fact he could win a ball, sometimes win a free, get vital scores at vital times. He was a real match winner for them. Yeah, I just agree. I think the Kilkenny physicality and aggression really was it upset Limerick's game plan, and we saw Limerick in the Munster final how cleverly they used the ball, how the quality of ball they played into the forward line. At times the quality of ball in was shocking from Limerick. Wasteful kind of ball into 1v2s inside. Whereas they hadn't been doing that up until now, and that's probably a sign of just being a bit rattled. So agree with Kieran, the composure is the word I would say. They didn't have the same composure they had. And what I really admired about Limerick in the Munster Championship was when every time Tipperary came back at them and got a goal, Limerick had the composure to go down the field, get another score or two. And we could see from even the last play of the game, where Limerick had 2 or 3 chances to just set up an equalising score, and each time there was that lack of composure. That pass went to toes instead of to hand, and they kind of worked the ball into maybe a worse position before they finally shot. When 2 or 3 times there was a good pass and that ball was over the bar, So look, that was kind of something that they lacked at times, and again that has to go down to Derek Ling and Kilkenny and the way they approached the final. like hurling isn't all, as we know, about skill and touch or whatever. Sometimes raw physicality can upset a team as well. And as you said as well, Mark, just creating that space inside, they managed to do that at their end, whereas at the other end, Limerick couldn't manage to get their key men inside. Like Adam English, although he started well, went out of it. Shane O'Brien just couldn't get him on the ball inside, and when he was on the ball, it looked dangerous. So yeah, that was kind of the main difference in it, was that Kilkenny were able to find their forwards that bit more. Their forwards were probably that bit better in the 50-50 situations, whereas Limerick couldn't really get to their normal game plan of, that quality of delivery inside was lacking. And in the end of the day, that's what it came down to. And despite everything, despite, you could say, Limerick being off colour and, Kilkenny having those extra goal chances, it still came down to 1 point in it. And I remember commenting at the time, sending into the WhatsApp group, saying that point here could be vital in the end. And because straight away at the time, even though the replay wasn't straight on, you could see that the ball did not look like it was over the bar. And then that photograph later from Sportsfile showed that it was never over the bar. And again, what's the point having Hawkeye in the stadium? This is an All-Ireland final. Have Hawkeye turned on. Let's make sure these things, there's only 2 stadiums in the country with it. All-Ireland final is on there. It's just a shame that it wasn't used.
Yeah, national championship game. But I suppose I can see where the GA HQ organisers not using Hawkeye. But again, we heard about this slitter that was supposed to be all-encompassing, GPS, all that good stuff. But can't really adjudicate if a ball goes over the bar or not. So I think from that perspective, I think there will be reflections here in terms of this under-20 hurling championship. It's a national championship after all, but also the eligibility rule of intercounty players. I know pair management had been touted fairly regularly, the lead up to this season. But again, thinking of Cathal O'Neill probably in the stands looking helplessly on, particularly down the stretch, could have helped that team no end. But I suppose finishing up here, guys, the Limerick under-20s, I mean, Kilkenny winning, it's really a stepping stone to intercounty senior. I suppose from a Limerick's perspective here, Ruairi or Kieran, do we see any guys here from that under-20 side really kind of step on now and maybe get into that Limerick senior squad now, given that this competition is now concluded? Kieran, maybe start with you first.
Yeah, I think the one name that would have been on people's lists maybe coming into the 20 championship was Adam English. And I think for me, he'd been really disappointing, The Munster final, obviously a cracking goal, but he went out of it again for half an hour, and albeit he finished strong. I think he was, he was everywhere in the last 7-8 minutes. He seems to just go missing in the middle of games, and you can't do that as a senior player. I think he's in the last 2 or 3 years has been talked about, and about an up and coming player, but I think we'd have to see a lot of improvement to take the next jump. I think O'Donovan, I was really, really impressed. Corner forward O'Donovan. He kind of reminds me of Peter Casey in a way, win his own ball, nippy, take his scores. I think you could see a lot of improvement with him, and I think Aidan O'Connor. I think, to be fair, over the whole championship, he's been there. He's been taking score. I think he's a player you could see go straight into the Limerick panel next year. Maybe not feature much, but been in around the guys there. Might do no harm. But yeah, look, I always go back to the case where Shamie Flanagan was only a sub for the under-20s or the 21s when they won the All-Ireland, and look at him now. So it's the next 2 or 3 years, maybe 2 years is it's where the heavy work and the hard work is required to take that next step.
Absolutely. Rory, get you in there. Any prospects from the Limerick Kilkenny under-20 side that you've seen here that look as if they have a pretty bright future intercounty wise with the seniors in the next year or two?
Yeah, like Adam English, I've seen a lot of him. He's a really talented hurler. He's still underage next year, under-20. So we're looking for that. As Kieran said, there has been points in games where he has been quiet for spells, and that's something you'd be hoping to see improvement on next year, that you get a more consistent performance through the whole game. But there's undoubted talent there, even just the ability for that goal against Tipperary. And we're probably saying we want to see more of that. Aidan O'Connor, I'd agree. I think Aidan O'Connor should be in the Limerick senior panel. I think he's better than some of the players that have been coming on for the senior team at the moment, that have been tried even in championship in the last few games. He's again, I thought one thing he showed this year with that team was leadership when Cathal O'Neill was unavailable to them. He really stepped up, I thought, for them, especially Munster final again in the final. And look, as I said, a real talent for him. Colin Coughlin, I think, guys, might have a future in the forward line. I think as a half forward, very good in the air. Just get him in that bit closer to goal. I just think is a bit of like a Tim O'Mahony kind of, reminds me of a small bit, where he's very good driving forward. And I think maybe from the half forward line, he could cause real problems for teams from there. And maybe it's something that John Kye might have a look at, maybe next year's league, and try him out in the forward line. But yeah, overall, there is a lot to work with, and there is this conveyor belt there, that there is a bunch of players coming through. Shane O'Brien, remember, and Keane Scully have another 2 years. Like, they were minors last year. So you're looking at those guys another 2 years being the main men on the team. So it is a good thing in a way, I think, that you always have a few guys coming through. So next year they'll have the experience of playing the year before, and it's just a way of kind of giving experience to the next bunch as they come through then as well. But look, I know at the time a lot of people around here are very disappointed that they really thought like this team were capable of winning the Ireland, which they were. And look, they didn't. I think people are a bit disappointed that they probably didn't hit the heights they had in Munster, and that was the main disappointment. And had they were very close to Kilkenny being a bit off colour. So, and that's not taking anything away from Kilkenny. I thought Kilkenny were deserved winners on the day, and they weren't lucky or anything on the day. Like, I know the point we're arguing about it, but overall I thought Kilkenny had that bit more about them on the day. But from what I'd seen in previous games, I just thought that Limerick might have the edge in them, but it didn't transpire. So yeah, look, as we said, just even the fact that they're winning Munster still, getting the finals, and the fact that Kylie every year now has another one or two to look at coming through. Saying that, like, very few have broken through. Cathal O'Neill this year, he'd be hoping that another couple might break through next year onto the team. Because there's one thing Kilkenny kept doing under Cody to stay there for so long, was to keep having players coming through every year. And it's something that's probably needed with Limerick.
Absolutely, and I think it is the learning curve, isn't it? You learn from your defeats more so than your victories, and I think from a Limerick perspective, they will go away, reflect, review it. Top Mullins, the interview was very gracious post game regarding everything, and very unanimous in terms of Kilkenny victory. And I think for Kilkenny, I think Billy Drennan, maybe a guy that we really need to look out for, and I think Fitzpatrick as well. What a physicality of a player there that Kilkenny have defensively going forward. I know he was taken off late, but I thought just work rate wise, he was just absolutely phenomenal. You've Ian Byrne as well from Kilkenny. Kilkenny are always going to turn out those underage stars, really, aren't they? And then, we kind of top of the program in terms of maybe physicality over maybe skill set in the seniors, but certainly you can see the raw talent here, and you can see the sheer application of work rate of these Kilkenny young lads as well, because they had a point to prove. This team had been, so close yet so far in terms of some minors, All-Ireland successes and Leinsters. So I think it was very important for them to get over the line, and they certainly did that last weekend, and congratulations, Kilkenny.
I was just going to say one thing about Kilkenny as well is like Galway, they fought it out and dug it out in a tight game. Wexford, the exact same thing. Wexford put them to the pin of their collar. They came through. Same with this match. So it's a great sign of a team that can fight out these wins when, it's a sign of unbelievable character in a team, that they're coming out the right side of these tight games all the time. Yeah,
they were so battle hardened going into this All-Ireland final. And I just had that inkling that, they would not go away from Limerick here, that this would be right in the melting pot, and the composure would be the key ingredient here. In fairness to Limerick, they can reflect they've had a good under-20 season, and again, you hope for these players from both sides that they'll use the learnings of this All-Ireland final and take it on for better success with club and intercounty. Lads, we'll leave it there anyway. Many thanks to Kieran and also to Ruairi, and next week I suppose the battle lines will be drawn, I suppose, given the Munster Hurling final during Bank Holiday weekend. So we'll have a preview of that. We'll also look at Croke Park with Kilkenny and Galway, and we'll also have a run the rule on all the other kind of hurling news that may be happening next week. Until then, thanks very much, guys.
Cheers, Mark.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you liked what you heard in this podcast, why not subscribe to the Hawkeye Sidekick podcast on either Amazon, Spotify, YouTube or Twitter platforms. You can also follow me at Hawkeye Sidekick on Facebook and Twitter for the latest sporting opinions, articles and reports.